The NFL draft is going to be taking place, of course, on next Thursday. We've got a draft expert on the line. And this young man, I tell you what, he's doing so many big things. He, of course, joined us on the program last year. He played his collegiate ball quarterback at North Carolina Central, also a recruiting coordinator and assistant coach during those great years that North Carolina Central was making a run in the MEAC for those MEAC championships. Jordan Reid of ESPN, NFL Draft Analyst, joining us back here on the program. Good to talk with you again, Jordan. What's happening?
I'm good, man. It's always a pleasure being able to join you. Feels like we've known each other for well over 10 years now. So always happy to have our yearly chat.
Absolutely. You know, I want to start here. Shedeur Sanders, a lot is being made about Shedeur Sanders, and you've watched Shedeur Sanders. And I think the interesting thing is this. He makes the jump from high school to Jackson State, does very well his first year, even better his second year. He makes what I would even argue is a two-tier jump because, you know, if you're playing SWAC, it's considered lower level. So you're not only FBS now, but you're Power 5. And he makes that jump. Good first year, even better second year this past year where he, 74% completion percentage. So a lot has been made. You know, it seemed like he may have been, it was Cam Ward and he coming, you know, when the season ended, then he and Cam Ward. What do you make of all of this Shedeur Sanders talk in terms of why teams may think he's not the right fit for them?
Well, I think there's a lot of things attached to it. And interestingly enough, I think how they got here moment as far as Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders is very similar. Because if you remember, Cam Ward started out in the FCS level with the Cardinal Word, and then he transitioned to Washington State, and then most notably with Miami. And then with Shedeur taking a very similar career path, even though there was one less stop. Of course, starting his career at Jackson State and then going on to Colorado. But I think it's just a combination of the physical traits of how scouts really view them a little bit differently. I think Cam is just on another tier as far as with his physical traits. Now, that's not to say that Shedeur doesn't go on and have a better career than Cam, but whenever you're taking a quarterback inside of the top 5 or 10 picks, teams are always going to chase those physical traits, even though a quarterback may not have had a better career, even better tape. It's just they're chasing the tools a lot with those quarterbacks, which I say that P word can get you in trouble a lot, and that is potential or even upside. With Shedeur, though, I think he's the most accurate passer in this year's draft class, and he has a lot of what I like to call translatable traits, which is the poise. He was exceptional in fourth quarters during his career, and even going back to his days in the SWAC, I thought he came in and did a remarkable job as far as taking over that program and getting back to their winning tradition at Jackson State, which they have historically had. So there's a lot of things that are working in his favor. It's just the difference of opinions on the physical traits and what his exact ceiling is going to be on the next level.
No, I definitely understand that. But it just seems because now, you know, there's some talk that he may fall in some other, you know, and it's talk, like we don't really know, right? But some other guy, you know, Jackson Dart has been thrown into this conversation, and some guys that may be picked even before Shedeur. But I guess my thing is, we knew all of this, everything you're talking about. We knew all of this right after the college season was over. So was there something, maybe, I guess, more scouts had a chance to look maybe a little bit deeper at all of those traits that you're talking about?
Yeah, really December, January, and February is really when your coaches and your high-ranked executives really get involved in the draft process. So you really start to figure out where teams have guys ranked, or things really start to materialize. Really before that point is really just a lot of opinions, and then a difference of opinions as far as where guys can be. But as we get closer to the draft and the draft date in April, that's where things really start to crystallize a little bit as far as where the NFL or potential teams really have them on the draft board.
Let me speak a little bit to Cam Ward. You've broken the tape down. You mentioned, 100% correct, because even at Incarnate Word, I went back and looked at some of the numbers. I mean, this kid passed for over 2,200 yards in 6 games at Incarnate Word when they had the COVID shortened season, and then all of his progression. I mean, what he did, the next year, the first year, then the next year, 4,700. I mean, his numbers are incredible. What what makes Cam Ward so special, and in terms of being pretty much, I think, even your number one pick in this year's NFL draft?
Well, I think it's just the underdog mentality that he's always had throughout his career. And if you remember when he was coming out as a recruit in Texas, he was not heavily recruited at all. And he played in a wing T offense. So he was lucky to throw the ball 10 times a game. But he's kept that same mentality all throughout his career. He feels like he's been counted out everywhere that he's been. And that's exactly how he plays. He has that, a lot of people like to say nonchalant, but I call it poised and really playing laid back, just because that's what you want to see from a quarterback. You don't want to see a player that's panicky or jittery in the pocket. You never get that sense from Cam. He's always in control. He's always poised. And even going back to last season, he always was able to make one play to keep Miami in the game. So you can go back to the Georgia Tech game is one, even though they lost in that game, I thought he made a ton of plays. The Cal game and even the Virginia Tech game when they won on the Hail Mary down the field in the back of the end zone, he was always able to make that one play to help them win the game. So it's just a combination of the poise, him always being in control, and then that underdog mentality that he's carried with him throughout his career.
Now, if I'm looking at the your mock draft, am I understanding this that you're saying that the Giants are going to trade up to get Cam Ward?
Yeah, so I have a new one coming out next Monday. That one's about a month old. So that was something that was like the biggest rumor that was happening coming out of the combine, which is when I released that mock draft. But as Tennessee has started to meet with Cam, they had an opportunity really to get to know him at the private workouts and the 30 visits. They're pretty much convinced that he's their guy. So I expect them to take Cam Ward with the number one overall pick. But coming out of the combine, that was like the big rumor that was happening, that the Giants were going to try to trade up in order to get Cam.
Which would make a lot of sense. NFL draft analyst Jordan Reid of ESPN, of course, former North Carolina Central quarterback and coach. He joins us here on the program as we talk NFL draft, which is taking place on next Thursday. So so many things to talk about. Where ultimately do you believe when your mock draft comes out on Monday, and that can be found at ESPN.com and ESPN Plus, where will Shedeur Sanders be drafted?
I'm going to have him at 9 to the Saints. I think that's a fair spot of where he could go, but things get really interesting if he does not go to the Saints at number 9 overall, because there just isn't a lot of visible quarterback landing spots until you get to Pittsburgh at number 21 overall. But there also could be another team that ends up trading up for him. So let's say the Giants or the Browns pass on Shedeur at 2 or 3. Both of those teams have the first pick, the first and the second pick in the second round. So they could trade back up ahead of Pittsburgh in the first round if he somehow slips past the Saints at 9. But I'm going to have him to the Saints at 9 just because we saw the Derek Carr news recently come out about him and him possibly missing all of next season. And outside of Spencer Rattler, they don't have anybody else to really compete in that quarterback room. So I think Shedeur would be a great addition there in New Orleans.
The narrative maybe earlier this week, which I think is a fair narrative in terms of Travis Hunter. And, we're talking about the quarterbacks, but Travis Hunter is like a two-way player, a generational type of guy. And we're not talking about him as much, but that's because quarterback rules sports in general. It just does, whatever level in whatever sport. So, speak to Travis Hunter. Do you like him more as a receiver? Do you like him more as a corner? And then ultimately, where do you think he goes?
I mean, he's my favorite player in the draft, Donald. I think he's so special. Like, this dude is a rare two-way player that we really haven't seen since Charles Woodson was coming out of Michigan, and also Champ Bailey when he was coming out of Georgia. Those are really your only two comparables that can be used for Travis Hunter. But if I were a GM, I would play him as a corner full-time, and then I would sprinkle him in about 15 to 20 plays in the package at wide receiver, just because it's very rare to see the inverse happen. Outside of Troy Brown during his time with Bill Belichick in New England, there really hasn't ever been a receiver that's played full-time at that spot and then transitioned over to corner. And I just think the ball skills that he has and being able to really eliminate one side of the field, essentially with Travis Hunter, I like that more so than potentially using him sparingly as a wide receiver and trying to force the ball to him.
ESPN NFL draft analyst Jordan Reid joining us here on the program. We're talking some NFL draft. We're going to step aside, take a break, come back. We're going to ask Jordan about a couple of other guys, maybe get a little preview of his mock draft and talk about some of the HBCU players that could also be drafted. Keep it locked. All right, stand by. All right, you good?
Yep.
Okay, all right, here we go. Welcome back to the program, talking some NFL draft. Jordan Reid, ESPN NFL draft analyst, joining us on the program. Of course, played his collegiate ball at North Carolina Central and was an assistant coach and recruiting coordinator at NCCU before getting into the whole draft deal, and is doing some really, really big things. One of, indeed, the experts, and you can hear him when he speaks that he indeed knows what he's talking about. So, Abdul Carter, I want to get your thoughts on him, Penn State's defense, or former now Penn State defensive end, and, what his career potentially could look like, and then ultimately where you think he'll go as well.
I think the easy comparison for him is Micah Parsons. And it's not just that they went to the same school, they play the same position, and they wear the same jersey number, but I think as far as just the way they move, their aggressive mentality, and then just having a knack for getting to the quarterback, they're very similar, have a very similar size profile as well. But I think the special thing about Abdul is that you have to remember, this is his first year ever playing defensive end. He was an off-ball linebacker prior to that point. So just imagine where he's going to be 3 to 4 years from now, just the ceiling that he could have. I think he could be a Micah Parsons type of player on the next level. We see how well Micah has done in Dallas already. So I look at the team like the New York Giants that have a need, that have a need off of the edge with Brian Burns and then also Kayvon Thibodeau already there. So they don't have an immediate pressing need, but I'm of the belief that you should never pass up a player that's in your star or your what I call your bucket A for a player that may be a need but is in bucket B. So whenever you have that player that's the highest ranked player on your board and he's the best available, go ahead and keep a strength to strength and go ahead and take a player like an Abdul Carter. Now, like what we saw with the Philadelphia Eagles, allow those defensive linemen to really attack the quarterback in waves just because they get tired of that. And I've been in those shoes before. It can be absolute hell for quarterbacks when you're facing very talented defensive linemen that constantly come at you like that. So I look at the Giants at number 3 overall. I think he would be a great fit there.
A guy that I believe you like, and a guy that I didn't even know about until about the middle of last season, had Rhett Lashley, the head coach of SMU, on this program. And in doing the research, I looked at Brashard Smith. I'm like, well, this guy's got some numbers. I didn't really know about him, and then followed his career throughout the rest of the season. And boy, I mean, as Coach Lashley let us know, he made the switch from wide receiver to running back. So, speak about him. What kind of grade do you give him, and what round do you think? Is he a potential first rounder by chance?
No, I don't think he's going to go in the first round. He's a day 3 guy. I think he's going to go in the 4th or the 5th round, if I had to guess, just because it's such a deep running back class. He's going to be pushed down a little bit. He's not an overly big guy either. He's more of a complementary option, but I think with him playing wide receiver and running back is going to help him a lot, especially with these teams really facing challenges really to differentiate some of the players in this tier of running backs and putting them in different buckets. Brashard Smith having that experience at receiver and then also showing that he's capable of being a productive player at running back. There's going to be a lot of teams that are looking for an offensive weapon like that. But he's one of my favorite deep sleepers in this year's draft class, and I think we could get as many as 30 running backs drafted in this year's class, which hasn't happened since 2017. So that just goes to show you the depth in this year's class. But if I'm looking for somebody that could be that versatile, what I like to call 1B or complementary option, Brashard Smith would definitely be at the top of my list.
ESPN NFL draft analyst Jordan Reid joining us here on the program. Who are some of the guys, Jordan, maybe that we're not talking about enough? Because obviously we're mostly talking about Shedeur Sanders, really, but then we're talking about some of the guys we mentioned, Abdul Carter. We're talking about Cam Ward, etc. Who that you think, first round or not, that's a guy that really can make an impact right away we're not talking enough about?
Oh, I'll let you pick a position. What position?
Yeah, but that's fair. Let's go. Yeah, you got me. We can't go quarterback. We can't go running back. Let's go on the line. We don't talk about the offensive line enough. So let's go offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go with the HBCU guy, and it's Carson Vincent of Alabama A&M. He's one that a lot of scouts are really interested in. And, what I thought was really great for him is that Alabama actually allowed him to participate in their pro day. So we know a big school like Alabama, all 32 teams, all the GMs in the league are going to be there. So him getting those extra eyes on him, I thought was really good. He performed really well at the Senior Bowl as well, which is a huge accomplishment, especially being an HBCU prospect. There's really only one or two HBCU prospects that participate in the Senior Bowl every year. It's very rare that it's an offensive lineman. So him going down there, not only participating, but playing well and showing that he belongs with a lot of those other big schools. I thought he helped himself a lot, and he'll probably go somewhere in probably the 5th or the 6th round if I had to guess. But I think he's going to be a really productive player on the next level.
Yeah. Do you think that, because from some of the stuff I was reading, he also participated in the NFL Combine, that, you just don't know, because our players, and I've written about this for years, our players rarely get drafted, yet 40% of the HBCU players in the league are free agent guys. So they don't get drafted, but they can play. We know they can play. Do you feel like, I just, before the Alabama showing, I just felt like, maybe people weren't as high on him. Do you think he really elevated his stock even more because of the pro day at Alabama?
Yeah, I think he did. And whenever you're able to participate in something like that, it shows that there's a lot of NFL interest in you. Just because if you're projected to be an undrafted free agent or a priority free agent, they usually don't let you participate in something as monumental or big like that. So it was really, really good that they not only allowed him to participate, but he went out there and showed well too.
Yeah, shout out to those schools that allow for that to happen. Alabama, NC State has been a school that has done that for many, many, many years. Shout out to those schools. Last thought before we talk about some of the more about some of the HBCU guys. Jackson Dart, I want to get your thoughts, because I'm hearing his name a lot out of Kentucky, the quarterback. Sort of your thoughts on him and where you think he'll go.
Yeah, he's one of the more polarizing prospects in this year's class. I see him more so as a second-round quarterback. That's where I have him on my board. But you're starting to hear stuff that he could go as high as the Saints at 9 or even Pittsburgh at 21. The Saints at 9 would be extremely high for me. But the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21, I think, is a little bit more realistic for him. Or even the back end of the first round, I would be completely fine with that. But me personally, I see him more so as a second-round guy. But also, it's just the credit of the quarterback class not being as strong as what we have seen in years past. I mean, we saw 6 guys go in the top 12 last year. Obviously, the depth of this year's class isn't that. But the thing that's just a bit worrisome about Dart is just he played in that college-oriented offense with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. And the things that he's going to be asked to do on the next level, he just wasn't asked to do that consistently at Ole Miss. So there's going to be some mental hurdles that he's going to have to overcome. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take for those things to click for him. I think that's what is ultimately going to make or break his career on the next level.
Jordan Reid, of course, ESPN NFL draft analyst, joining us for a couple of more moments to talk some National Football League. All right, let's talk. You mentioned Carson Vincent out of Alabama A&M. A tackle, right? Would that be his position, be tackle specifically?
Yeah.
Left tackle.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, great. Who are some of, we had Rob McDaniel on this program last week. James Burgess was on this program last week. I've heard a lot of talk about Irv Mulligan. As a matter of fact, you did a preseason ranking of the top HBCU players. You had Karan Prunty, who obviously had a chance to see him play up close. A person who transferred, going to play one more year now at Wake Forest. But who are some of the other guys that from an HBCU standpoint that you think could in fact be drafted this year?
Well, your two big ones are, we already touched on Carson Vincent, Robert McDaniel out of Jackson State, who's a safety / corner. I think he's going to be a safety on the next level, though. Those are your two guys that are likely to get drafted. And then after that, You have some borderline guys, James Burgess, the corner out of Alabama State, who's generating some interest. Was really surprised to see him not in any postseason All-Star games. I thought he definitely was worthy of playing in some of them. Irv Mulligan, we talked about, who was a terrific addition for them down at Jackson State. They really rode his coattail into winning an HBCU national title last year. Kenny Gallup, who's a safety / linebacker out of Howard. He's another name to definitely keep an eye on. Kendall Bowler, a corner out of Florida A&M, is another name that I think has a chance to get in camp for somebody as a priority free agent. And then also Jeremiah Pruitt, who also plays for the Rattlers. That's a tight end as well. So it's a very intriguing crop of HBCU players this year.
Any buzz on Virginia Union running back Jada Byers? I mean, I know he's a smaller guy, but I mean the production in college is undeniable.
Yeah, I mean, not any buzz on him right now, but I think he may get a chance in somebody's training camp or rookie mini camp. I definitely think he's worthy of that. But I mean, a few years ago, we saw a guy with similar size and Tariq Cohen go on to have a really good career early on in his tenure in the NFL before the injuries unfortunately happened with him. But just the suddenness, the shiftiness, and the quickness that he plays with, I definitely think there's a place for him somewhere on somebody's professional roster. I'm just hoping he gets a fair chance on the NFL despite his size.
And then what are you most looking forward to, if anything, once in the draft, this year's draft?
It's always the quarterbacks for me, just seeing where they land after Cam Ward. I think it's a foregone conclusion now that Cam Ward is going number one. So I'm interested to see where Shedeur goes, where Jackson Dart goes. Jalen Milroe is another name that's generating some early round interest as well out of Alabama. I'm interested to see where he goes. And then Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. I'm not quite as high as some other people on him, but I'm interested to see where he does go in the draft.
And then lastly, and I know I asked you this last year, but for our new listeners, can you just speak to your journey? I just find it really fascinating, quite frankly. Obviously, having played football on the college in collegiate at North Carolina Central specifically, this could be a progression, right? Like to what you're doing right now, and you're doing it well. But what made you want to really get into this? And did you foresee yourself being a draft analyst at ESPN ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked that a million times a week, and like I tell everybody, like I just fell into the journalism space. I didn't plan on, being a journalist and working at ESPN or anything like that. I wanted to take the route of being a high school coach, a college coach, which is what I originally was as a graduate assistant, at North Carolina Central. And then I went the assistant coach route. I wanted to eventually be a coordinator somewhere and then a head coach. And then once I got old and couldn't move anymore, I wanted to be an athletic director somewhere in the country. So that was the original plan that I had for my life. But in 2018, we unfortunately got let go when I was coaching at Central, and then had a family with my now wife. I had twin girls. There will be 6 next month. So wanted to figure out how I could combine journalism as well as the game of football. So I just started some YouTube videos, started doing voiceover scouting reports of some players that I thought were really intriguing. And I got the courage to publish some of those actually on social media. I started an account on then what it was called Twitter, X or whatever you want to call it now. And then I started a blog as well. So I just started publishing my scouting reports, doing some voiceover scouting reports of some things online as well. I got picked up by a company called the Draft Network, which was a startup at the time. They were looking for somebody that had my qualifications. I was there for 2.5 years, covering everything from, D2, D3, FCS, and then, of course, Power 5 at the time. And ESPN, I got a random direct message from one of their executives. They say, "Hey, we noticed your work. We love your grind. Would you want to interview with us?" I was like, man, is this spam? Am I being punked? Like, I couldn't believe it. So went through a ton of rounds of interviews, met a lot of different people. And then, you always got to be ready for your opportunity, just because I've always felt that hard work puts you in position for blessings to find you. So I'm just somebody that's worked hard and just took an advantage of my opportunities. And when those blessings came, I just took advantage of it. So like I said, I just fell into it and I just took advantage of my opportunities. And I'm still trying to, take advantage of those opportunities and make everybody proud.
doing an absolutely fantastic job. You can hear him, of course, right there talking. His mock draft, his latest mock draft is going to come out on Monday, ESPN.com, ESPN Plus. Follow him on X at Jordan_Reid, R-E-I-D, Jordan_Reid. He is ESPN NFL draft analyst, former North Carolina Central quarterback and coach. Jordan Reid joining us here on the program that talks of NFL draft. Jordan, always appreciate the time, man. Continue to enjoy this process.
Absolutely. Thanks